and we're going to be using a platform called Scratch, which is based from MIT University in Boston. So we'll start off by joining Scratch. So we're going to create an account for ourselves in Scratch. So you create a username and a password, and then you sign in, and then you'll be able to create your first game. So once I've signed in and created an account for myself, I then can go and start creating my first game. So I'll go to create. Now you can do this on on any device, but you will need really to be able to see it properly. You'll need to have a computer to be able to do this at home. So let me go through the basics of it before we start actually creating anything. So this here is the screen that you'll be able to enlarge and that people will be able to see. This is where we see the actual game, where it can actually be played. The red flag is where we start the game, and the game ends when I click on the the green flag is where I start the game, the red flag is where it ends. The game may, well, what I'm hoping you'll eventually do is the game will have some event will happen that will cause the game to end. So somebody reaches a score, or the actors die, whatever. So that's the basic platform that we see. We see a stage. So the stage is the background to the game. So these are all the different backdrops. So I can choose a backdrop. Now these are built into the game. So let's say, for example, I'm going to choose a canyon here. So I can choose any backdrop, and you could choose multiple backdrops. As in, when a certain event happens in the game, you may want to change screen, so you move on to a different level, so you can have multiple backdrops being used. The other part then here is we have our sprites. So the sprites are the actors who operate in the game. So here they always give you a cat as a first sprite, so you might decide, well, I want to edit that or get rid of that, and I'm going to have a different sprite. So let's say if I go fantasy, I might decide I want to have, let's say, this. Okay, now I can resize this. So down the bottom I'm going to make them a little bit smaller. Let's say if I make them 30 size. Now the first game that I'm looking for you to do is going to be a very simple chasing game. So you've got one object which is moving around the screen randomly, and you've got another object that the player can control, and either the objective is to capture or touch the random moving object, or to avoid being touched by the random moving object. So I'm going to choose a second sprite here, and the second sprite, let's say, is going to be, let's say, a bat. Okay, so, and I'm going to make my bat to be a good bit smaller. Okay, so my bat is there. Here he is. Okay, now we move them in the X and Y axis. Okay, so if you think about it, if I just, let's say, grab this sprite here. Okay, so Frank. So if I just look at my X's and Y's here, the middle of the screen is 0, 0. So as I move Frank to somewhere else, his X and Y coordinates will change. Okay, so those coordinates are what we will need to use or be aware of when we're starting to move our actors. So we have our sprites, two different sprites, and we have our backdrops. Okay, so we move over here to our controls. Okay, now we can have costume changes, so we can make the sprites alter slightly. And we can make different sounds happen if different events trigger it. So we start off with control and events. So we'll have the first starting event. Now we're going to start the game, and let's just say, for example, that the bat is the thing that is going to move randomly around the screen, and this Frank sprite is the thing that's going to try and chase after or maybe capture the bat. So I've got the bat highlighted down here. When green flag is clicked, that means when the game starts, I want the bat to move randomly. So I'm just going to focus on moving the bat first. Now these here are all the classes. Now obviously if I just scroll through these give me all of the different controls that we have, and these all connect in to the code that we have here like pieces of Lego. Okay, so we're going to move to motion to start with. Okay, so let's just say, for example, when the game starts, he's going to move 10 steps and he's going to turn let's say right by 15 degrees. So click on that there now. Oh, that's not very exciting. He's moved a little bit. He's moved a little bit again. Every time I click the green flag, he moves a little bit. Okay, so I want this to happen on a regular basis. So I'm going to go to controls here. And I'm going to get him to do this continuously. So I want him to move 10 steps. I want him to turn 15 degrees. And I want to keep on doing that. Okay, so he's going to move 10 steps, turn 15 degrees, go back, move 10 steps again, turn 15 degrees. So he ends up moving in a circle. Well, that's kind of a bit boring, really. So I'm going to stop that. I want to make this a little bit more random. So one possibility is I could make him move a random number of steps and turn a random number of degrees. So I go to operators here, and I'm going to pick a random number. So he's going to move between 1 and 10 steps, and he's going to turn a random number, and I'm going to make it, let's say, between minus 30 and let's say plus 30 degrees, and just see how that goes. Okay, now I can see he's kind of getting stuck at the edge of the game quite a lot, so he's kind of falling off the screen. So I want to stop that happening. So I go back to motion, and we have a thing here where if he's on the edge, we want him to bounce back into the game. So what he's going to do is, when the game starts, he's going to move a random number of steps, turn a random number of degrees. If he's on the edge, he's going to bounce back into the game, and then he's going to go back and do the whole thing all over again. So now he's moving a little bit more randomly around the screen. Fantastic. Now we're going to look at his costumes. So when I brought in the sprite, the bat, there are a number of different versions of the bat. So what I can do is I can change the costume to make it look like his wings are moving. So we can change that code. So if I go back to looks here, when the game starts, we're going to switch. Every time he moves, we're going to switch costume and make him move a random amount. See how it now looks like he's flying, because every time he moves, he changes from one appearance to the next. So that's one possibility. Now, in terms of motion, another thing that we could do is we could start the game by getting him to glide to a random position instead. And then if he's on an edge, bounce, and then change costume. So we could try that. I'm just going to pull all of this out, and I'm going to slide that there in instead. And let's try that and see how that looks. So he's moving to random places all over the screen. So that's something you might decide to try instead. That's completely up to yourself. Now, let's go and have a look at the other sprite. Okay, now remember, I can change the appearance of him. Maybe he might be a little bit big now. So I'm going to make him, let's say, size 20. The other thing is the backdrop. I'm just concerned that the colors is a little difficult to see the colors that we have there. So I might try and make him, let's say, something where the colors are all similar. So let's say boardwalk. I might try that. It's just a little easier to see my actors here. So I'm going to choose Frank. Now what I'm going to do with Frank is, when he moves, we want him to be the thing that's controlled by the player. So up, down, left, and right. So what we'll do is we'll go back to events here, and we're going to use keys to get him to move. So we're going to move left, right, up, and down. So when, let's say, if I just do the up arrow and then the down arrow. So if we think X's and Y's, okay, the Y is the up and down. So if I press the up arrow, we want him to, let's just go down to motion. This is the thing that controls movements. We want to change Y by +10 when he goes up. So I'm just clicking it in there. I'm going to change Y by -10 when he wants him to go down. Let's just check that works. Yeah, so he moves up and down. So if I just start the game, Now we have the idea that this guy, I don't have my left and right yet, okay. And the next thing we'll need to do is we'll think about what's going to happen when the two of these interact. But for now, I need you to open your account. I need you to start creating your actors, these sprites that are going to act. Now, one thing you could do, if you like, is you could import a sprite of your own. So you could have, a really good photograph of one of your mates and make one of your mates the actor. Okay, so you could, for example, have a picture of your mate with their mouth closed and your mate with the mouth open, and have that as two costumes for one sprite. So your mate his face is wandering around the screen, and then you're running to try and avoid being eaten by him, something like that. So you can import your own sprites. Be a bit creative on this. You could have photographs, backdrops that are of your own location if you like. But I need you to start by creating the basic game first. And once the game is created, then we'll talk about it. Well, what happens when these two interact with each other? So start with that for the next day.